All right, thank you for joining us on Worldwide Slot Car Chat on Zoom, number 71. I'm your host, Greg Gaub. Gang's all here. We got Luff, Don, Gaza, John, Steve, Mike, Jeremy, Garth, Neil, DeJuan, Frank, and other people. And we're going to try something new today. We're going to try using the raise hand feature so I don't miss everybody. And rather than starting with show and tell, well, this is kind of a show and tell, I guess. We're going to circle back on something that Neil was working on. Neil, take it away.
Thanks. What was it, last week? Or no, actually 2 weeks ago. We talked about this. It was popping out of the slot on the exit turns. And you guys gave me some things to do and check. And I did those. The first thing was from Greg about the pickup brushes. I put a new set on, and I cut the rear one because on Carrera they're double. I did that, and 50% of the problem got better. Then I believe it was Dennis and Chris told me about cleaning the tires. And so what I did was I trued the tires first, and then I cleaned them. And now it's 100% stays in the groove. So I just wanted to give you an update that both those things work perfect.
That's awesome. I mean, that's exactly why we're doing this. So we love hearing about that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So thank you very much for circling back on that for us. Does anybody have any questions for Neil or what he was working on? That seemed pretty straightforward. Yeah, go ahead, John.
So Neil, did you do the adjustments one at a time just to see how things would go? Yeah.
Yes, I did the braids first, and it got better. I would have to say almost 50% better. Then when I pushed a little bit, boom, it started coming out. And then I worked on the rear tires, and then it all went away. I mean, obviously, if you go too fast, you're going to come out of the turns. But for the most part, no, it was all good, 100%.
So how did that feel like when you were tuning and it was getting better? How did that feel?
Oh, it felt great, actually. You know, it was like, I didn't even think that they even looked bad, the braids, or that 4 is not necessarily as good as 2. But I guess with the double braids, it was lifting up the front of the car just a tad. I mean, it was pretty, they're pretty close because it's a magnet car. But we're putting a new set in and cutting the rear ones out worked great. And then I threw the tires and cleaned the tires, and they're the stock tires that it came on. It's not like I put brand new tires on it, and it worked flawlessly. So
yeah, braids and tires are easily top 2, if not top 3 or 4 of things that you should do or work on a car to get it to do what it's supposed to do. So absolutely. Yeah. Proof is in the pudding, or proof of the pudding is in the eating. Does anybody else have any show and tell? I got a little bit, but I'm looking for hands. Go ahead, John.
Okay, so a bit of a, here, let me just share. It's kind of a quick one. It's a continuation of, remember that wonderful piece of scenery that I received?
Oh yeah, the house.
Right. Yeah. Well, I found a place on it, on the track for it. So I'm just let me just show you. And this is and you'll see the whole video on Saturday when I post it on YouTube. But I just thought that I would show you folks. Hang on a minute. Sorry about this, folks. One moment, caller. I wasn't expecting to be accepted so quickly. This is so cool. Hang on. Share video. Oh, there it is. Oh, Wayne's here. There we go. Oh, I'll let Wayne in. Here we go. So that's the spot that we found for it on the corner, and that's what it looks like.
Nice.
Oh yeah, it turned out so very, very well.
Yeah, fits right in.
I like your hay bales.
And Frank Peter made those. He made them himself. And that's why I put a stone wall in front of the hay bales. When we run it, the track in reverse direction, cars can tend to sort of hang their tails out here a little bit. So I didn't want to wipe out the hay bale. So I thought, okay, I'll put a stone wall just to, give the finger to anybody who oversteers a little bit. But and then I took some photos of it lit up because it's also wired now.
Cool.
There it is on. There's with the lights on. And then with I started lowering the lights on the track itself, and then put the lights in the park on. So you can kind of see what, because we can actually cycle the lighting so that it's at different levels as you're driving.
Oh, nice.
And then this is almost total darkness. And
is that an electronic billboard, or is that
It is, yeah. Well, no, it's actually an old Castrol billboard, but the lights are so darn bright.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And that's it.
Awesome.
So yeah, it turned out really, really well. And when this is lit up at night, it really looks cool. Yeah.
I mean, I love a lit track for the realism, for the modeling aspect of it. Not big fan on racing on them. But they look great. You get your car going around, and like we used to say, look down low while the cars are going around like you're a kid, on the floor.
Well, we found through experience not to have total darkness.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Garth, did you have something you wanted to add or ask?
I wanted to ask John what the background was. What the
this printed background?
Yeah.
That's actually it's actually the Ardennes. It's actually a panoramic view of the Ardennes forest in somewhere in Belgium. I'm not quite sure where.
That's awesome.
Wow. Where did you get that?
Oh, I made it. So there's actually a panoramic program you can download that will take any panoramic picture and then break it up into 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that you can then put on a poster board.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. I can't remember the name of the program, but I'll try and look it up if you like.
Seems seamless.
Yeah, well, that's because I'm standing at a bit of a distance.
Okay.
On a similar note, I made a large format background for a part of my track with Mount Rainier in the background, which is our local mountain. And I basically took my own picture and did some photoshopping of, to give a good perspective of it, but still be clear, and trees and whatnot. And then I just went to Costco and used their photo printing, and you can do poster size prints. And I basically just took 2 poster size prints and spliced them in the middle. And if you're a Costco or a friend is a member of Costco or a similar, big box store with a printing, service inside, chances are it's only going to be, 10, 15, $20. You pay more for one of those, big rollout panorama things and do a whole lot less DIY.
Yeah. But you know what, this was a great project I did with our daughter when she was still, I think, in public school. And you can kind of see a line here. But the other cool thing that I ripped this off totally from our local hobby store that has a great train layout where they have a road and then they actually built it out.
Yeah. Which
is really kind of cool.
Yeah.
So total kudos to Panther Hobbies because they did that, and it makes, and especially when it's at a distance, it really does have a bit of a neat effect.
Yeah, and it probably looks more realistic in real life than in photographs.
Yeah.
Because your eye does tricks in real life that it doesn't do with a photograph.
And the other cool thing too, to your point, Greg, when whether it's lit or not, just watching a car go by with like actual scenery is just so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I only have the other 85% of the track to do.
Your track has always looked pretty good to me, John, so don't sell yourself short on that.
Well, you're very kind, but that's just strategic photography.
Well, you do it very well. All right. Well, thank you very much for showing that. Does anybody else have any show and tell before I do mine? I don't see any hands, so I'll go ahead and do mine. Raise your hand if you want to do a show and tell after me. And here we go. So if you are a rivet counter or loathe fantasy liveries, avert your eyes because this is my next car for the analog series. This is a MR slot car, Porsche GT1, being done in a blue and yellow Marlboro livery. So he's going to put Marlboro decals and all stuff all over that. And it's basically Marlboro except blue for red and yellow for white of the Marlboro livery. I think it looks fantastic.
I think it looks great. Yeah, wasn't that their stage? I think that was a brand. That was their Stage 4 cigarettes.
I can't tell if that's a joke or not because I'm not that much into real car liveries. But yeah, I can't wait to get this when he's got it all decaled up. It's gonna look freaking, and it pops. It pops even more than that in real life. So I'm super stoked for that one. And then of course I also received an order. Oh, switch. There we go. Which you guys are not entirely surprised about. Electric Dreams made this happen for me.
You got them.
Yeah, my local does not carry Pioneer for whatever reason, so I got them from Electric Dreams. Got the pre-order. Fantastic. So we're gonna look through some beautiful blue and yellow footage here.
Did you paint those, or they came that way?
These are straight, yeah. I do everything I can to not paint cars. Hence my friend doing that Marlboro blue and yellow for me. Yeah, these are straight from Pioneer as you see them. And now we switch their places. Get some nice close-ups. Look at that ass. These are fun little cars. And of course, you got to get a nice down low view to see the dude in there.
Have you taken them around your track yet?
I have. They are Pioneer cars. I plan to do some work. And here's the obligatory chassis view. As you can see, they're teeny weeny little cars. That's, DPR door, so, can be easily digitized for Scalextric or Carrera. I like their magnet holder because these are sturdy, springy tabs that allow you to easily press out the magnet without breaking tabs and therefore put them back in without needing to use glue or tape or something, which I love. So thank you, Pioneer, for doing that. As is normal for Pioneer cars, as the ones that I'm familiar with anyways, both the front and rear, and you can see a little bit of sliver of brass there. Both the front and rear axles are whole axles with brass bushings that pop straight up out of the chassis. So you don't gotta wiggle wheels off in order to pop them out and true them. So both these cars are gonna get all four wheels trued and glued. The front wheels are gonna get coated with super glue for zero traction. I'm not entirely sure if I'm gonna do anything about the guide system. I like how they designed it from a customer service point of view, in that to change the braids, you pop the guide straight away from the chassis. It just pulls out quite easily, which is the main problem from a performance standpoint. They wiggle around like nobody's business. There's no solidity in that guidepost, but it enables you to easily pull that guide up, slide the braid out, and then slide a new piece of braid in with their little crimped end that you press into the front of the guide, similar to larger scale, commercial racing type braids. I like that, but I'll probably do all the tire work and lube and all that kind of stuff, and then see if I feel the need to change the guide braid system, because it'll require complete replacement with standard braids, or whatever the guide that I get uses, and then soldering wires again, because these use a little metal bent piece of metal to press up against the ferrule of sorts on the guide. So yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with their guide system. I know people who despise it, but I have things that I like about it. So we shall see. I'm currently working on a 3D printed reciprocation machine for the sanding plate for my tire eraser, so that I don't have to sit there moving it back and forth the whole time. I'll just turn the machine on and let it do the moving back and forth. I have no ETA on that, so don't be waiting on me before you chew your tires. But I'm using those Legends cars as kind of incentive for me to work on that, so that I can use that in order to chew those 4 whole axles of tires. So that's my show and tell. Anybody got any questions on that or commentary? Go ahead, Jeremy. Then I'll call on John.
Those Pioneers, how do they handle? Because I've been trying to, I have one in the kit form, but I haven't touched it. Nobody in my club seems interested in it, but I was just wondering how they handle as a club car.
Pioneers have been pretty popular for Trans Am series in clubs all over the place because they offer a really good variety of classic Trans Ams, Mustangs and Camaros and whatnot. Generally, people do what I was talking about, true and glue all the tires and everything, and then a lot of clubs will just replace the guide system entirely. Probably going to need shimming. Whatever guide you choose is probably going to need a variety of shims to get down to the appropriate level on the track. And Steve, have you done any Trans Am modifications?
Lots to the Pioneers. We all had whole batches of scale electrics. When Pioneer came out, bluntly, we kind of sold all the scale electrics, just about every one of the guys.
Yeah.
No, they're wonderful little Trans Am cars. Their motor is one of the finest, for what it is.
Yeah.
But what motor's in the Legend, Greg?
Yeah, thanks.
I didn't get a picture with the body off. Looks like, let me go ahead and share that so you guys aren't just looking at my turned head.
Is it an 18K?
The Legend kit I have is an 18K.
Okay. Boy, they got a squirt.
Yeah, I can't read it. I'm sure it's the same motor. Typhoon, 18K Typhoon. Yeah, that makes sense.
They should be quick.
They are. I did put these around my track just, before I did anything to them, and they got get up and go for sure.
Yep, I'll bet they do. Are they top heavy?
Didn't seem that way, no, because they're so wide and the wheelbase is so short. I don't think top heavy is going to be an issue. But again, I hadn't done any work to the tires, so I didn't have a whole lot of traction to contend with.
Okay.
The other thing that I was going to point out, similar to how Pioneer have done for past cars, they included 2 pinion options. Three altogether. It comes with a 12T on the motor, and they give you an 11T and a 13T to swap in if you want more torque or more top end.
They look good.
They do look fantastic, and I'm so happy that they did a blue and yellow for me. What do you want to say, Garth? You're muted. You're still muted.
How are they in regards to scale?
I'm not a rivet counter, so I have not put a metric tool up to it of any kind, but they sure look to scale. What do you say, John?
They're a little overscale.
A little over? The real
Legend cars are really small. The real Legend cars are actually made with Yamaha motorcycle engines.
Yeah, okay.
They do take up most of the lane, so that makes sense that they're a little bit big for actual 1/32 scale.
But heck, so were the monogram 1/24 scale midgets in their day. So
yeah, I don't. I'm here to have fun. Definitely don't care about scale. Fun.
Exactly.
And the go-karts.
And the go-karts. Definitely not 1/32 scale. But
not unless you're Andre the Giant.
I would suspect that scale was not of utmost importance. Scale accuracy was not super important, and they erred towards being able to reuse parts, same axles and bushings and motors, and because if you went true Legend scale, you'd probably have to retool for different motors, all kinds of different things. Yeah.
But still, I mean, kudos for them for coming out with something that's really unique.
And they've been out for a few years now. They've been, I remember when he first started promoting them, I was like, yes, that looks like super fun. And then he kept coming out with these, gold and red and white. And, I'm like, come on, man, I need some blue and yellow up in here. I don't want to paint it. But thank you, Jules. Thank you so much, Jules, for doing those Sunoco cars.
And it only took 4 years.
It only took 4 years, but I absolutely look forward to finishing my blueprinting on those cars and getting them around the track, and probably take them for a King of the Hill and see what the other guys think. And, if they like it, then we might end up doing a series with them.
Well, I was going to say, are you going to try and perhaps see if there's a series in the making with them in your club?
I brought it to the race on Monday night, and, one of the other guys was like, oh, yeah, those are so much fun. I want to do those. but he loves everything, so he's an easy sell. The other guys not so much. They take a little convincing. So I didn't even bother putting it on the track, or I put it on the track and just kind of did a couple of parade laps really, but I didn't bother putting it up for King of the Hill because I want it to be a good running car before I have them judging on it, right? So gonna do the blueprinting, let them run it around, see what they say, and then propose it as a series, maybe time after next or something like that. We'll see.
We got Kelly with a raised hand.
Hey, Kelly, what you got?
Hey, I don't know if you've seen this chat, but Slothead said that those Pioneer cars are 1 to 30 scale.
1 to 30. Thank you, Mr. Slothead. 1 to 30. And Jeremy, you had something to say still, or did I not unraise your hand? Okay.
Yeah. Last week I talked about laser cutting my own silicone washers. So I cut the 5mm part out fine, but when it comes to the inside, the 3mm, it just burns so much that it just kind of disintegrated into itself. I was like, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to go with a punch system or something for those.
And then the challenge is going to be finding a punch.
Yeah, I keep looking. I don't see any
2 punches, right?
Yeah. Well, they make washer punches that will punch out a washer.
Yeah, well, actually, or if there's a leather worker's punch, you might find something that's fine enough to do that.
Yeah, that's
right. Find something that'd be great. The second thing,
and luckily, I'm not going to say I told you so.
I finished my
there we go.
Dunlop tower.
Let me spotlight you
with my track on the part. I added my own part. Anyway, that is done now. So there's 2 projects knocked out. I just got to add my little flag up here.
What'd you use for the flagpole?
Styrene, just a white piece.
Tube.
Yeah. Yep.
Good deal.
That is it.
Looking good. Gonna have to share pictures of that on your track once you get that all installed.
You put a different roof on it. Oh, it's flat. Okay. Yeah, I did it too. I like that.
Did you do my roof?
No, I couldn't get your file to work. For some reason, you had a file in for the door. And I couldn't slice it correctly, so I skipped over it.
Oh, okay. I'll go check that out. See what's going on.
It might have just been my slicing, but that's fine.
I mean, it shouldn't have been. It was pretty simple.
Jeremy, are you planning to put any figures in or some lighting or something in it?
No, not yet. I have another month before I get a new garage door, and then I can start working on my track again. So I got options. Everybody says that though. Everybody's got time. Got all kinds of time.
Yeah, I put a bunch of homies and stuff like that inside mine.
Yeah.
Looks like Gaza added legend type cars that ran over here in Australia, since these are from 2013 and are V8 supercars that run here. Gives you an idea of the size. Were you showing off something? Was there a picture?
There's a photo with it. You can see that or not?
Not. Oh, okay. There it is.
2 above.
Do you want to try sharing your screen and show us the photo, or do you want me to do it?
Oh, it's a bit technical at this early stage of the morning.
All right, I'll download it like I usually do here. All right, anybody else? I don't see any hands. Anybody got anything they want to share and show? Go ahead, Mike.
First off, on the Trans Am cars of Pioneer, the Mustang that I've got, the notchback, is one of the fastest Trans Ams that I've got.
They are.
It's just a great car. And the other thing is, thank you to you personally for helping me with the power base. I finally got it to work.
Yeah, good news. I'm glad that my idea worked. It was a shot in the dark, but an educated one. So good thing that it worked.
Yeah, once I got it into receiving mode. Then it downloaded, and now it works fine through RCS 64. So it's great. We used it for a race meeting, and it was fine. Outside of the problem with a stray braid.
Yeah. Oh God. Do you want to tell that story? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, we're in the middle of the race, and of course, everything stops, and we can't find it, and it's just a single piece of wire. So we started taking tracks apart, and of course, the first thing to do is take the jumper tracks out. So I did that, and we kept going, and we narrowed it down to the front straight, of course, hooked into the pit. So it's like a disassembly problem, to say the least. but we got it squared away and it was fine after that. So note to self, always vacuum the track beforehand.
Well, sometimes it doesn't even work. I had a similar issue, and it would only happen when I put a car down in that particular location. And the thread of braid was trapped in the join, right between the pin and the track. It had wedged itself in there, and it was sticking at such an angle that it wasn't touching the rail as a car passed over it. But if I put the car down onto it, it then crossed over to the other rail.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, what is happening? I was thinking it was the braids on the car, so I was fixing the braids on the car and kept doing it. And it would only happen every once in a while because I didn't realize it was at that location. And then I finally did it at that location again. I'm like, okay, maybe there's something in the track. I start looking for screws, and then I see this braid thread just kind of sticking up there, giving me the finger. And I tried to pull it out with my fingers. I could not pull it out with my own fingers. I had to get, I had to really pinch hard. Or I don't remember if I had to get pliers or not, but it was in there. It did not want to come out. So yeah,
I imagine they wedge in at speed too, right?
That's the only thing I can think of is it got ripped off a car. It happened to just be poking the wrong direction and got ripped off when the car was flying by. It's like, oh man, first world problems of sectional track, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of segues into something that I wanted to do to address a viewer comment or question. They had seen a previous episode and had no idea what oxygen was because we were talking about oxygen and whatnot. So they Googled it and they're like, oh, wow, that's what it is. So I kind of wanted to do a primer on digital. Like I don't have a presentation, but I kind of wanted to just do a quick-ish digital primer. So what is digital? Most people are familiar with slot cars, as in the car has a slot, it goes around the track. Digital is slot cars, except there are sections of the track that allow the cars to go from one lane to the other, or multiple lanes. That in essence is what digital is, right? Cars can share lanes, they can change lanes. They're not swapping lanes like a crossover track in analog. They're going from one lane to the other, and then they're staying in that lane when another car is still in that lane. There are a variety of digital systems. Almost all of them are fairly proprietary because developed by toy companies. They want to be the only pie that you're taking slices of. So they all do things a little bit differently from one another. And generally, they are incompatible with one another. But I will classify any system that allows more than one car to be in the same lane at the same time. So that means that AC2 car falls into my digital category, even though with AC2 car, there are no decoder chips, there are no fancy electronics. It's literally just diodes that allow the car to get half of an AC signal, and you have specified lanes that cars are allowed to share, right? So you got two cars that can share the same lane, and then you have another two cars that share another lane, which is separate from them. And they can choose which lane they use, and depending on how you set up your layout, which is usually a routed track, sometimes they do whole layouts with all 4 or 6 or however many lanes they are duplicated. Sometimes they just have a section of the layout that allows the faster car to pass the slower car. And usually it's just something like a flip of a switch at the driver station that flips the flipper so that that driver can make a pass. I put that in digital, even though it's the least digital of all the digitals. The other digitals are Scalextric digital, Carrera digital, 1/32 or 1/24 or 1/43 scale, Ninco digital, SCX digital. SCX has had 3 entirely separate and incompatible digital systems: SCX, the digital system, SCX WOS, and the new SCX Advance, which is notable for another reason. Carrera technically had 2 digital systems as well, Pro X, and then their D132, 124. Those systems are not compatible with one another. However, D143, 124, and 132 all share the same basic functionality and can actually kind of work together. Scalextric Digital has been the same technology since 2006 when it first came out until today, even though they have new power bases that have different features. Fundamentally, it's the same. I can use a 2006 Scalextric car on my 2021 Scalextric Digital power base and vice versa. Ninco Digital, I'll try not to get into the specifics of all the differences between all the systems, but when it comes down to it, generally what you have is a housed piece of electronics where all the controllers plug into, and your controller is basically telling the electronics what to tell your car to do, right? So your controller number one, you're saying I want to go this fast and I'm not changing lanes. The power base or control unit or whatever you want to call it then sends a signal through the actual rails of the track. The cars are all reading that same signal from the rails through their braids and the wiring to the chip inside the car. And then the chip says, oh, I'm supposed to be going this fast. I'm supposed to be changing lanes or not. And then it sends the appropriate signals to its motor for how fast the motor should be going or whether it needs to change lanes. And they all, like I said, they all do things slightly differently, but generally speaking, most of the toy digital systems are sending a signal through the rails, and then a chip in your car is decoding that signal and doing what it needs to do. There is another type of system which is more akin to a kind of a hybrid between slot cars and radio controlled cars, in that the signal is no longer going through the rails, but going from your controller directly to the chip in the car. These are wireless systems. So the rails of your slot car track are only giving power to the car because the chip needs power just like a motor needs power. So it's giving power to the chip so you don't have to have a battery inside your car. And it's decoding signals from basically your radio controlled slot car controller. Such systems include Slotted Oxygen, Scorpius Wireless, and the new SCX Advanced system. Although the SCX Advanced is using the same old track, they are now using a direct wireless communication from their controller to the car chip, and the track is only providing power. And again, all of these systems have different ways of doing it, and I could go into very specific information on how each system does things differently from each other system. But in a nutshell, that's what digital slot cars are and how they work. Generally, you also have the ability to connect some kind of race management system, either hardware accessories, such as a lap counting accessory for some systems, or using an app on a mobile device like a tablet or a phone to control the system, or PC, laptop, computer-based applications and a cable connection to the device, or for the wireless systems like Scorpius and Oxygen, a wireless receiver that plugs into a USB port on your computer. And I want to stress that although I have my personal preferences, that if you are interested in digital, every system has its strengths and weaknesses. You will have fun with any of those systems. They are all fun to race with. They all have hurdles for you to overcome, and things that they do that the other systems don't, and vice versa. Sometimes a system is chosen simply because that's what happened to be under the tree at Christmas time. And some people go through lots and lots of research and questions, and can it do this? Can it do that? Does it, do I want it to do this? Do I want it to do that? And when it comes down to it, I don't recommend digital slot cars to anyone who's been in analog slot cars for a long time and does not really like the idea, like they are stoked about the idea of being stuck behind somebody else in your lane until you can change lanes out from behind them. If your expectation is to simply push that car out of your way, you do not want to get into digital slot car racing, because you can't do that on a real track. What makes you think you can do that on your slot car track? Garth, go ahead.
My simple question is, how do you change lanes?
Excellent question, and thank you for having me add that to the discussion. I don't know of any, well, okay, there is one system I can think of that doesn't actually have a button on your controller that you tell the car when to change lanes or not. Pretty much all of them will have, at the very least, throttle control via a trigger and lane changing control via a button. And generally you hold the lane change button down until the car passes over the lane change sensor, so that the car can then tell the lane changer that yes, in fact, it wants to change lanes. And then the lane changer says, okay, and it moves the flipper one way or the other. Now that's where everything is the same. And then every system has a different way of making that actually happen between you pressing the button and the flipper actually moving. The one system that does not conform to that is known as BLST, or Best Lane Slot Track, by Sillage Racing. They use an electronics-based lane-changing best line system. The track is designed such that when cars are not near other cars, they go into and maintain a racing line throughout the track. It's still a 2-lane track, or more if you want, but then interspersed within the 2 lanes are lane changers that take a racing line between the 2 lanes. Oh. So a car traveling around a BLST track is essentially always changing from one lane to the other in order to be the fastest racing line based on your typical, racing around a racetrack, line a race car would take. What happens is when multiple cars are racing on a BLST track, if you're coming up behind a car that's in the racing line and you're in the racing line too, you're both in the racing line, as soon as you get near enough that a pass is potentially going to happen, then the electronics in the lane changing system automatically split you each out into the adjacent lanes and don't allow you to come back into either one of the other lanes until one of you is far enough ahead or behind the other car, at which point you will then be put into the racing line again. So if you can't make that pass and the other car maintains its lead ahead of you and pulls out far enough, then you'll both go back into the racing line. And if you're just side by side for multiple laps, you're just side by side for multiple laps until one of you messes up and the other one gets ahead. The one exception to that is when they make a track with a pit lane. Generally, you're not having your car go into the pit lane automatically, so you still have the button option to pull your car into the pit lane to do your pit lane related stuff. So that's a pretty cool system. I've never raced on it. It looks super, super cool. David Kaya, who came on to show us his really cool advanced controller, that's his company. And so he builds these fantastic tracks. He's also done some analog tracks. And he often does BLST tracks, still have to have one of the other systems as the fundamental control mechanism, right? So he doesn't make a BLST system. His tracks accommodate whatever system you want to use. So if you wanted a BLST track, you'd say, hey, David, I want a BLST track using Scalextric or using Carrera Digital or using Oxygen or Scorpius or whatever the case may be. Whatever your control mechanism is more or less separate from his track lane changing system. Unless you say, well, I want this lane changer to be manual and I want that lane changer to be manual. He'll do whatever you want. It's all custom. So super, super cool. Great question. Thank you very much, Garth. And again, that was that was more long-winded than I intended it to be, but I wanted to kind of give a good kind of overview of what is digital and why would I want to get into digital. One other thing that I kind of wanted to address, which is one of the first things that comes up with people, is you can't tune digital, or it's magnet racing only. Well, that's nonsense. Is analog magnet racing only, or is it crazy fast cars only? Of course not. Everything that I do with my analog club, I also do with the digital club. We race non-magnets, we do tires, we do tuning, we do pretty much all the same stuff, except there's a chip in the car. The next thing is, well, it's more expensive. And I challenge any slot racer out there to show me their budget and how much they spend on any given car or their controller or whatever they spend their slot budget on, because I guarantee you that my budget is probably smaller than yours. However, if you're going apples to apples and you say, well, a slotted car with all these upgrades and a slotted car with all these upgrades and a digital chip in it is more expensive, well, duh, by like the 30 or 40 bucks that the chip costs. But you're putting in You're putting in double that in all kinds of upgrade and hop up parts and, hollow titanium axles and just, come on, don't come at me with it's more expensive. It's more complicated. Yes, it's a computer. There's computer stuff involved. If you don't want to deal with any computer stuff, probably don't want to deal with digital. At the same time, the toy systems, Carrera, Scalextric, SCX, Ninco, they're robust and relatively simple systems. So generally not a whole lot of problems going on. And I love to point out, I've been to many an analog race with technical problems because their light bridge isn't pointing correctly at their sensors or their computer program isn't working properly or whatever. Analog racing is not devoid of technical issues, so don't come at me with that one either. If you want to race digital slot cars, then you deal with those things. Just like you want to race analog slot cars, you deal with the analog things that come with it. It's part of the hobby. You deal with things as they come up and you move on. Garth, you had a hand up again, and then I'll go on to Juan.
What is the how many cars can you race on a 2-lane track?
Excellent question. I love you, Garth. So some people have formulas for that, and they say, 1 car per 6 meters of linear rail, or whatever their formula is, because they don't want a crowded track. They want clean air in front of their car all the time. Well, phooey to that, I say. I race 6 cars on here. That's a 54-foot track. I definitely don't have 6 meters of linear rail per car on that track. I like traffic. That's one of the things I like about digital. Mm-hmm. However, to address your specific question, most of the toy systems, Carrera, Scalextric, Ninco, SCX, have a limitation of 6 cars on any given track, and that's not because of the length of the track or anything to do with how many lanes or anything like that. It's simply because when they're trying to cram multiple cars worth of control information into the rail, which is a serial connection, so it's basically a string of control information that repeats, the more cars you add to that string of control information, the more lag there's going to be between your car getting its control information and then it getting its next control information. So to reduce that to a point where it's undetectable by human reaction speeds, 6 is the general accepted number of how many cars you can successfully serially control through the rails on a track. That's why the wireless systems came about. Scorpius and Oxygen more or less came around at about the same time. They'll argue with one another who came first, but they both came around about the same time because of that limitation. And because it's wireless, the bottleneck or the limitation is not the serial communication on the rail, it's the wetness of your wireless connection, your wireless interference in the air, right? So if you're in a place with no other wireless activity, which is what, I don't know, the Amazon somewhere, you could probably do 100 cars and not have any problems. But for any civilized area, you're going to have wireless just completely dousing your track area with wireless of all different kinds, cellular, just the gamut, right? So they've got to do all kinds of tricks like frequency hopping and redundancy checks and all this kind of stuff. It happens very quickly, obviously, through the air wireless. 2.4 gigahertz is what most of the systems use. But they're choosing to limit it to 20 cars for slotted oxygen. 24 is claimed by Scorpius Wireless. SCX, with their advanced system, decided to limit it to 9. Not sure why, other than they just figured that most people aren't going to have a very large track, so 9's probably a good number to limit to. I would love to see 20 cars on this track. I think that would be a blast and a half. The other 19 guys, probably not so much, but me, I think that would be great. But yeah, so it depends on which system it is as to how many cars you can race. And it depends on your drivers as to how many cars you can race. So I'll give you an example. With my digital club, we at one point we had a dozen or so guys at my track racing, and we did kind of a qualify where the guys with the faster lap times would race together and the guys with the slower lap times would race together. And the the group with the slower lap times was crashing significantly more often, and we do a lot more track calls and marshaling and whatnot. 4 or 5 cars was probably a bit much for them to be racing around because they needed more clean air in front of their cars. they needed less cars to crash into. But when we raced the second group with the faster guys, we're more experienced. We can keep ourselves out of trouble better. There were times where we would go minutes without crashing at all, and multiple laps. And it's a wonderful sublime. I use that word all the time to describe it. It's a sublime feeling when you're 6 cars going around that track, changing lanes and not hitting each other and making passes and going into the pits and taking care of pit functions and getting out of the pits, and just it's all running nice and smooth. So yeah, it depends on your driver skill levels. If you've got a bunch of kids and newbies, then you're probably going to be using magnet cars and low power and stuff like that anyways. But yeah, I mean, if I had 20 of the guys that were racing in my A mains or whatever you want to call it, we could probably do 20 cars on that track. Not so much with the guys with less experience. So there's going to be technical limitations, and then there's going to be driver limitations. Dewan, you're next.
Garth hit one of my questions, but I also was told that the Carrera has a lower limitation for the 124 cars than the 6. Is that true? And is that the only system that supports 124 cars? Is the Carrera or some other systems, digital systems also are out there that's going to support 124 cars?
Good question. The main reason that Carrera is the only system that supports 124th cars is because theirs is a track that can handle that large of a car. Their 124th scale chips in their car aren't necessarily any different. They're bigger because they've got more room to fill in a 124th scale car. But you can put a 132nd Carrera digital chip into a Scale Auto or a BRM or whatever kind of 124th scale car and run them on Carrera track. You can also put an oxygen chip into those cars or a Scalextric digital chip, as long as you make sure that whatever chip for whatever system you're putting into the car has the appropriate power handling capability of the car you're putting it into, then it's just a matter of having a track that can take a car that big. The technical reason for Carrera's limiting 124th scale cars to 4 at a time rather than 6 at a time is not anything to do with the fundamentals of the system, but just that their power supply is only capable of providing a certain number of amps of power, and more than 4 D124 cars with magnets pulling off from a start will exceed that amount. And so the power base will go into a brownout or an overload mode and basically protect itself. There are lots of guys out there running 6 124th scale cars on Carrera Digital 124 by removing the magnets, using a different power supply. Some of them, there are modifications that can be done to the control unit itself so that it can handle even more power. Doing a rolling start, so instead of all the cars starting from a dead stop where they pull the most amps, they'll go ahead and, each car will go at a slow pace, and they'll actually have the safety car go around in front of them and then pit the safety car as the start of the race, so that even when they all gun it, they're all moving already, so it doesn't draw that many amps. And not Scalextric, but Slottit's Polycar track is just big enough to run some 124th scale cars, depending on how wide the car actually is. And I think Scale Auto is also coming out with a larger track format. So it's just a matter of making a track that will take a 124th scale car, putting a chip in that can handle the power requirements of whatever your 124th scale car motor is, and then doing it. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, Gazza, what you got?
Just on the wireless side there, I've got a wireless setup, well, throttle and that on mine, but I don't have any digital track whatsoever. I've just run a normal analog routed track.
Mm-hmm.
So it just as if you wanted to get that, you get the same sort of thing, of freedom of just walking around with just the throttle. stand anywhere on the track you want, walk around, marshal yourself, whatever sort of thing, and it works perfectly on that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and if you want wireless, you don't need to get digital. Absolutely.
No.
Yeah, there's Scorpius Wireless. Scorpius Wireless sells their Scorpius controller, and then the WAM wireless analog module. And then Slot It also make a wireless receiver called the CRI, and you plug your Slot It cartridge into that and drive analog. I believe Carrera made a wireless analog system as well, using their
years ago, I think it was.
And Inco took a stab at that, doing a wireless thing that I think failed miserably. There's definitely a good selection of wireless analog control from the cheesy toy stuff using infrared up to the club quality stuff with Scorpius and Oxygen out there. So yeah, absolutely. Wireless is great for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people sort of think that you have to have that if you've got digital. You got to have a digital track to do that, whereas you don't. And it's so handy too. Like when you've got a driver's station and everyone's shoulder to shoulder sort of thing, you can sort of say, I'll move around the corner here and just stand here, get a different view, and
Oh yeah, I do that all the time. Whenever I go to race at Allen's track, he's got those big routed tracks that take up half the room. So I'll bring my wireless, and while the guys are practicing, I'll be kind of semi-practicing from the other side of the track so that I can be there to put their cars back on while I'm just kind of making sure my cars run. You can't really race from not where the drivers race, but it's, you can goof around and stuff like that. But yeah,
You can get closer to the fridge.
That too. Absolutely. Good point. Thank you, Gary. What you got, Neil?
I too use. Oh, sorry, Neil.
Hold on, Wayne. If you want to interject, raise your hand. Go ahead, Neil.
You can't see me.
You use the raise hand feature.
I'm on my mobile phone. I'm sorry. I don't know where that is.
You tap the screen, tap the more button, and then tap raise hand. You're still muted, Neil.
Thank you.
There you go.
I have 2 points or 2 questions. Can you use? I think you use Oxygen on your track, your home track, right?
I have a Scalextric digital track that can be Oxygen. I also have a Carrera digital track that I use for testing purposes.
So I have Carrera. I could actually use the Oxygen system if I wanted to.
Sure.
Okay, that's one. The second thing is wireless controllers for my Carrera track. I haven't purchased any, and I know you're into it, but I don't know if you're into wireless or not, but I'm really confused on which way to go on purchasing my first one. I mean, I have wireless, but it's the Carrera, and I cannot stand a thumb control. It's driving me crazy. That's all I have, and I want to switch, but I just don't know what to choose.
Yeah.
Have any suggestions?
Yeah. Before I make a suggestion, I want to clarify what kind of Carrera track do you have? Is it analog? Is it Evolution? Or is it digital?
No, it's digital.
Okay, so you've got a Carrera D132/D124 control unit.
Correct.
Okay, so to be perfectly honest with you, I would say get the Frankenslot wireless controller because it's got, I believe they make 2 versions, one with and one without a sensitivity knob. If you can afford it, get the one with the sensitivity knob. But you don't need to go hog wild and get the SEP3 and because in order to do wireless with your Carrera digital control unit with something other than Carrera's controllers,
right?
You need something that is all in one, or you would need to go with the slotted SCP3 plus the wireless receiver unit plus the digital wired cartridge in order to basically split the wired SCP controller into a wireless transmitter and receiver that plugs into your control unit. That's a very expensive way to go, and I would only suggest that for people who already have an SCP, for other reasons or purposes, or really want it for some reason. The Frankenslot looks like a great standard, good ergonomically, designed controller. and it pairs directly with the wireless controller thing, just like the Carrera plungers do.
Yeah, so it just basically takes the place of my Carrera wireless controllers.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've had a project in my mind about designing something that can take the Carrera wireless internals and turn it into a trigger controller, but I've kind of put that to the side, and because Frankenslot make a great controller, there's other than budgetary reasons, it's like, do you really want to tear apart a Carrera wireless controller just to put it in a handle? There goes your warranty on any of those electronic parts, so get a Frankenslot. My other idea, which I have not started developing on, so anybody out there who wants to steal this idea, it's yours, take it and run with it. But the idea was to basically I don't have a Carrera controller here with me, but was basically to design a grip with a trigger, right, that has just kind of U-clips at the top, and you snap your Carrera wireless controller into it, and the trigger then has a lever arm that pushes on the plunger of the Carrera controller. So the whole Carrera controller is one piece. You never even open it up. You just snap it into the top of your trigger handle and start using it.
You're like the Wile E. Coyote of slot car racing.
Except Wile E. Coyote actually built his contraptions. I'm just the idea guy. And like I said a long time ago, everybody's got ideas. It's the person who takes the idea and makes it into reality that gets the credit. And I'm offering that idea to anybody who wants to take it and run with it. If I happen to put the work in and make it happen first, so be it. If you do, more power to you. But it should be relatively easy. All you'd need is, some 3D printed parts. You wouldn't even need a bearing, you just need a screw to hold the trigger in place, a spring, and then, pushes on the Carrera plunger. In fact, you wouldn't even need the spring because the Carrera plunger has a spring in it.
Right, it's like one of those spray handles for an aerosol can kind of
Exactly that kind of thing. Yeah, great analogy. So something like that for a Carrera digital controller, that would be a nice budget side way to do it, just to get the dang plunger, get rid of the stupid plunger and turn it into a trigger. I've seen people try to hold the plunger and do it like that with their finger. I can't get around to doing that. But yeah, if you just want to go buy something, I would get the Frankenslot. Okay. If you want to do wireless, I mean, there's good wired controllers. I think Frankenslot makes a wired controller.
Yeah, they go both ways.
And then DRS, Digital Racing Solutions, make a great wired controller with a really long coiled wire. I love my DRS controller for Carrera. But just to kind of touch on the oxygen thing, to make a fully stock Carrera digital track into an oxygen track takes some magnets, which most of us have piles of. You just put them under the track for where the oxygen chip will sense the start-finish line or the pit. And then you plug a wired or wireless, if you want, controller into jack number 4, and then tape the button down, because it basically works around the way that Carrera lane changing works by telling the lane changers that they're all car number 4 every time you push the lane changer button on your controller, even though your car isn't number 4. Okay. But basically, it's a completely harm-free, 100% reversible. In fact, you don't even need to reverse it to race your Carrera cars. You just, race your Carrera cars and then slap an oxygen car on there with your SCP-3 or whatever controller, and works just fine. That's exactly what I've been doing on my Carrera test.
Oxygen chip, though, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah. The car would be an oxygen chipped car, and if you're interested in looking into that, I would say get the slotted oxygen Type C chip, which you can use your phone to change the firmware in it so that it can actually function as a regular Carrera car with Carrera firmware in the chip, and control it with a Carrera. In fact, you could buy the chip now and install it in some fancy car that you want to try it with. Put the Carrera firmware in it, and you don't even need the slotted controller. You control it with your Carrera controllers.
Oh, okay.
And it acts like a Carrera car. And then later on, when your budget allows you to get the SCP-3 or whatever the case may be, then you put oxygen firmware into that chip, and then you get to feel what it's like to run an actual oxygen chipped car. It's cool. A pretty cool chip. All right. So you're pointing at somebody, but I don't see any virtual hands being raised.
Wayne has his hand up.
He's pointing at somebody. He's pointing at somebody. But see, my screen does not have the same organization.
Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, I saw Wayne with his hand up.
I see Mike waving his hand all over the place. I'll assume that Mike wants to say or ask something. Go ahead, Mike.
I had a thought. If you're using a mixture of Scalextric and oxygen cars, are you still controlled by the power base?
No.
Can you use a Scalextric's firmware, and is it controlled by the power base then?
Yes. So I have a variety of cars with Type C chips in them. Okay. If I want to use them as oxygen cars, where the oxygen software would do the controlling of things, I would put the oxygen firmware into that chip. And just using my phone, there's an app on the phone that lets me put the firmware in. If I want to race it with RCS64 or SSDC and be fully controlled by the computer, then I would put the Scalextric digital firmware into the chip. All wirelessly with my phone. The car. I put the car on the track, do some tappity tapping on my phone, and boom, it's a Scalextric digital car. Same thing with Carrera digital. Put it on the track, tappity tap. Minute later, it's a Carrera digital car, without having to rewire or change anything at all, anywhere.
Okay. And then will the fuel simulation work on it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. For all intents and purposes, when you put you got a Type C chip, let me clarify that. It doesn't work with other previous versions of the oxygen chip, but the Type C chip was specifically designed for doing this kind of thing. And they have released Scalextric digital firmware, Carrera digital firmware, and oxygen firmware. So that basically, for all intents and purposes, when you put the Scalextric digital firmware into that chip, it's not an oxygen chip, it's a Scalextric digital chip. And when you put the Carrera digital firmware into that chip, it's not an oxygen chip or a Scalextric chip, it's a Carrera digital chip. It just happens to be made by Slotted. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Fantastic. Anybody else, or should we move on to a different topic? All right.
Still me.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Well, I wanted to circle back on. First of all, I want to apologize for my inability to operate the Zoom on the phone at this stage.
That's fine. It's our first show. I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a hard time until we get into the swing of using the raise hand feature. But I'll forgive you for this one, but not next time, Wayne. You better get on top of that.
Oh, did you mention that at the first 5 minutes? Because I wasn't present at the time.
Well, tough to be you. Sucks to be you. Anyways, go ahead.
What Gaza said about using wireless analog, there are many, many benefits to wireless analog, and I use wireless analog through a system that you didn't actually mention, Scalextric app race control, the basic Scalextric ARC system.
Yeah.
And the biggest benefit that I find is that until I had that system, the children would go to marshal their car and try to take their controller with them. And of course, that would rip about 4 to 6 foot of the track up and pull it along like it was on tow. So the biggest benefit I find is that it's saved the rest of the track from being continually torn apart. And it's very, very useful if you've got amateurs or children. Right. They want to be able to stand anywhere, and that came to light. Came to mind off the back of what Gaza said about him doing the same thing.
Absolutely, yeah, and I didn't mention every single wireless option. There's too many. Go back in history, but yeah, you got the ARC Air, right? Not the ARC.
ARC Air, not ARC Pro.
Yeah, so ARC. So just for everybody else, the Scalextric system recently has 3 power bases. ARC 1, which is a wired controlled app-based power base. So you're using cheap and cheesy wire connected controllers to the power base, but the race management is on an app on your phone. ARC Air, which is analog and uses the app on your phone, but now has wireless controllers. So completely untethered, 2 AA batteries in the controller, control the power base. That's what Wayne has. Absolutely. Not only does it, prevent damage to the track itself when they start dragging controllers across the room, but the controller, the wire gets, stress from being yanked. So without wireless, obviously that's not going to happen. And the control plug in the power base would often get damaged severely when they would be yanking those out. years ago, we'd be coming up with all kinds of solutions to make, when kids did that kind of thing, that it would just come unplugged rather than pull too hard on the controller end or on the power base end. And they're great. Wireless controllers are in. I'll be honest, I like the Scalextric Arc Air / Pro controllers. They're good ergonomically. They're inexpensive, 2 AA batteries, and they can be oxygen controllers. If you want to race oxygen on a budget, you can turn a $30 Arc Air / Pro controller into an oxygen controller, which I love.
I'll second that. Yeah, and the other thing that's nice is they power themselves down if they're just set down for a few minutes.
Yep, they just go to sleep and just pull the trigger and they wake right back up. Yep.
And the third one you were about to mention was Arc Pro.
Yep, Arc Pro is the 6-car Scalextric digital version. So, yep. I'm trying not to go too much into all the digital specifics of things unless people ask specifically about them. And when we still got an hour left, I could easily eat up that entire hour going on and on about digital things. But I definitely.
It was interesting to hear you speak of the BLST system. To my mind, as you were describing it, it sounds like that when one car catches another slower car, both cars get moved to less than optimal racing lines.
Correct.
And that would slow them both down until the car behind them catches, and then it gets moved to one of those 2 suboptimal lines. And then eventually all the cars catch the cars on the suboptimal racing lines, and you end up with back where you started.
Yeah. Have you ever raced on a BLST track?
No, I'm going to presume that no one in the chat has either. And I was just theorizing about how it would go. I have seen the video, or a video. A friend of mine was really taken with it and said, I'd really like something like that. So I have seen it, and I didn't know exactly how it worked and how it worked itself. And we're getting into like collision avoidance type systems, aren't we? Automated collision avoidance, which I understand can also, is that also in the pipeline for traditional digital systems?
It depends on how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole. Scorpius Wireless.
I don't think any of them do that, do they, at the moment?
Not out of the box. There aren't any toy systems, track systems that include anti-collision. You can install anti-collision in some of them. For the Scalextric digital straight lane changers, there is community firmware. If you want to basically hack your lane changer electronics to install custom community firmware and talk to the right people, you can get firmware that will do anti-collision and other features. For Carrera Digital Racing Solutions, sells I forget the name of it, but basically it's an anti-collision system. You install new electronics and do some rail cutting to create the live dead strips that sense where the cars are and stuff like that, and add anti-collision to Carrera Digital. With Scorpius Wireless, there is a way that you can set up the lane changing sensors and electronics and configurations to do anti-collision and powering the lane change flippers with the right polarity of power and racing lines and stuff like that. It's a very powerful but also very complex as a result system. I haven't seen anybody do anti-collision for oxygen unless you do it with a Scalextric lane changer with the aforementioned hacking firmware.
Isn't that called analog?
I've never driven on a BLST track. I would like to. If anybody nearby has one that he can travel, take a day trip to. They're expensive and they're from France. So if you have one in the States, then you're probably not in my circle of friends to begin with. But I've seen lots and lots of videos of BLST tracks and multiple cars racing, not just 1 or 2 cars going around, but actual people, multiple people racing on them. I didn't see a whole lot of training happening as a result, but that might be because of the disparity in skill levels of the drivers. So once cars split up, there's almost never very long where they're next to each other. The faster driver gets around fairly quickly. So you'd have to have a number of equally skilled drivers and equally tuned cars, or relatively equally tuned drivers and skill levels, such that that would happen on a regular basis enough for the other cars to catch up to do that kind of thing. I've never seen that happen, but I've never raced on one either.
But I think the point with the BLST is if you're the faster car coming up behind someone, the software, if you're close enough, the software will divert your car into the passing lane. And then if you get to the next lane changer before the other guy, you're going to get back onto the optimum line.
Yeah,
and
we went over
far enough behind, you'll just follow on the optimum line.
Correct.
So in the long run, while people are spread out, they're always on the optimum line.
Correct. Yeah, I described the whole system. Wayne was basically saying, what if when that happens and the two cars are side by side while one of them is trying to make a pass, but is not able to make a pass. Therefore, both cars are now on the least fast lanes because they're not following the racing line, so they have to take tighter turns and stuff. So they're stuck side by side, and then the back markers start to catch up, and they get close enough to those cars to also get put off the racing line, and then potentially you end up with 2 or 3 pairs of cars stuck away from the racing line as they're all trying to get ahead, just because the 2 guys in front haven't been able to successfully, maneuver their pass.
Well, that's actually very much like real racing, because that's exactly what happens.
Right. So I think that's going to be such a rare occurrence that it's not happened yet, or when it did happen, everybody was like, "Oh, that's awesome! Yeah, they went for laps and laps." It was a momentous occasion, not an annoyance. But yeah, hopefully one of these days I get to race on a BLST track. Somebody holler at me.
I apologize for pushing in.
No problem.
I was about an hour late.
Since you're here now, do you have any show and tell? Now you have an opportunity to do a show and tell.
No, actually, I don't.
Okay, well, you can catch up on the first hour on the recording.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I forgot about it altogether. I've been busy building scratch build chassis for a customer, and I'm on the 3rd one this week. And
well, isn't that a show and tell?
Yeah, but they're still in pieces. They're not ready to go.
Okay.
He wants to show.
I guess I could show one of them. Let me go get it.
All right. I was just going to tell him that I showed off the Sunoco cars, but he just took his headphones off, so he can't hear me talking right now while he's going to look for this other car. So we've still got 45 minutes. Dennis is going to come back with something to show and tell. Looks like he's already back. So anybody else out there who's got something they want to show or tell or ask about, put your hand up.
Yeah, I do.
Do a little raise hand. All right, we'll come back to you, Mike. Dennis just came back with this thing.
Then you've probably seen these before, right?
Let me spotlight you.
The sideways M6 GT3.
Yep.
So the customer gave me the car and said, I want a brass frame. So that's what I've been doing.
Oh, nice.
See if I can get it so that it doesn't reflect badly.
It looks great to me.
Oh, looking good, Dennis. That's nice.
Yeah, so it's a simple angle winder frame. It takes the sideways gears, wheels, axles, and the guide, and then there's a spot right in here that will take a magnet because the customer wants a magnet in it, and so that's why it's basically now waiting for me to get to Electric Dreams tomorrow to pick up a Professor Motor 1053 magnet to go in.
Well, if you wanted a magnet, why don't you just put a slab of plastic there? And
well, he wants a brass chassis, but he wants it with magnets. so that's what I've been doing. Then there's another 2 similar to that he's wanted me to do. So.
What kind of motor are you going to put in there?
The motor that came out of the original car. I've used all the parts from the original car.
Okay, so like the flat 6 or whatever it is.
It's a long can 17,000 RPM motor.
The yellow one.
It's a kind of an orangey color. The sideways GT3s. It's not they don't use the same motor that the Group 5s use.
Okay.
They use an FK180, and it's a different spec altogether.
But you're basically using all stock parts more or less, other than the chassis.
Using all stock parts, putting a chassis underneath it, and then he can play.
Nice. Well, we look forward to seeing that completed. What do you want to talk about, Mike?
Well, in the races that I do digitally like that, with and I will preface this, we're using magnet cars. We're qualifying within hundredths of a second of each other, and a lot of times we'll be doing 45, 50 laps really close because our cars are really close. And executing a lane change with a car that's just marginally faster than the other one, or you drive a little bit better, is really difficult. And there has been a lot of times where I've had to sit behind the other two guys to do that. And it takes a lot of skill. Once in a while you screw up your timing and somebody will go off as a result of it. But, you know, then you realize that and the guy gets put in front of wherever you were, and, you know, they get next to we just have a gentleman's rule that's what happens if you screw up that way. And it's easy to do in a controlled situation. Nobody gets irritated with it. But I'll tell you, there's nothing better than being able to execute a really close pass digitally. It's really, really neat.
Yeah, that's what I use Sublime for. Just when you pull that off, and you don't crash into the other guy because you just squeezed right ahead of him. Neither one of you crash, but you're ahead of them now, and you both keep going. It's like butter. It's like butter.
Well, it's just like real racing. I mean, It really is just like real racing when someone outbreaks the other one and makes it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only difference is that your cars are not completely destroyed as an F1.
Yeah. Only partially, depending on how bad the crash was.
Yeah, well, that's true.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of times you're just racing, and you're hoping that you can put enough pressure on that guy in front of you that he makes a little slip up, bobbles a little bit coming out of the turn, or just goes in too hard and comes out completely, or whatever. What is your? So you said you had a gentleman's rule. So when somebody crashes, describe that for me from crash to back on.
Okay, so if you're doing a lane change and you knock someone off, you get put back behind the guy, and you also go to the point that you were last. In other words, you will you don't really get penalized by it, but the person that was trying to be passed that got knocked off will get moved forward proportionally amount from the track call, because I've got automatic track call on all the time. So, you know, there's a 1 second lag in there. So we'll put that guy ahead about as much as the second guy, because I'm only usually racing 3. We'll split the distance on there and put him ahead that much. So then I have to go back and try and get close enough to him to try it again.
So Michael, when you're doing this and you're ahead, do you get rear view-itis sometimes as well? Because that's what happens on a real track. Like if you split your focus, you really shouldn't think about who's behind you, but you do, which is why you're slower when you're being pursued. So if you're ahead, you like look at the guy behind you, and there's a.
Yeah, I've experienced that on a track day. You know, when I got a 911, a new 911 in the back of my 944, and he still can't get past, except on the straightaway. And but yeah, you do have it peripherally, but it's not quite as bad because you have a better overview of the track. Okay. I mean, on a real track, you don't have to glance in the rearview mirror. You don't have all real-time location like from a drone where he is. On a slot car track, you definitely have the whole picture all the time. So that makes it a little bit easier.
A little tip: next time you're on a track, someone catches up to you. Catching up and passing are two different things, man.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, there's definitely I don't race real cars, so I don't know what the actual rear view-itis is, but there's definitely a need to be aware of the other cars on the track, and you do have to fight the tendency to drive more conservatively when your focus is not on your own car, but rather where the other cars are. At the same time, driving more conservatively is often better because you're not pushing so hard, so you're less likely to be, bobbling out of the turn or going in too deep or
so you'll be smoother. You'll probably be faster that way too.
Slower is faster, absolutely.
Yeah, because you're smoother. Yeah, you're smoother. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you got to be aware of all the cars ahead of and behind you. Make sure you're in the right lane so that you don't get run through or run into another guy. But hey, Mike, when you just have a regular crash, is it just the 1 second until the track call and then you put the car back on where it came off?
Yeah. Generally, that's what we do.
So when you guys start using RCS 64 more, are you going to start using things like damage penalties and stuff like that?
I haven't introduced it yet. We're still, remember, these are analog guys for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So they like two things. They like the speed and the strategy. And so far, they've had a little bit of problem with the fueling. Every once in a while, when somebody crashes while fueling is going on, the computer gets confused and you can lose a couple laps pretty easy on that. And it made a difference twice in the 2 races on Monday, where you didn't get the fueling going, and the third guy will crash, and then of course everything's screwed up for a bit.
What I'll say about that is that the most often we had problems with guys having problems refueling and stuff like that was simply because they're just too impatient. They want to go button, and then just have it all be done. But if you go button, you might end up actually going button, and it goes past what you wanted to do, and you do the wrong thing. But if you had just taken a split second and made sure that it was going to what you wanted before you hit the activate button, it would do what you wanted and not some other thing that you didn't want to do, which is especially helpful because sometimes we'll run full, just everything, right? So we'll have refuel, the 3 different tire types, repair if we're doing damage penalties, throttle curve changing sometimes we'll forget and leave that one on. And then for some versions you actually had to choose the go sign before you could leave the pit. If you're using the latest version, then you just drive away from the pit. But some of the guys preferred the older version, and they would pull into the pit, get mad that the pit menu wasn't coming up fast enough for them, and then push the button a bunch of times because they want to get to the thing that's third down from the top, but they push the button not enough times because they weren't diligent, pushing it properly, or they push it too many times because they're just jamming on the button, and they're like, oh man, I gotta go back around because it's it revolves. You go to the end and then it starts at the beginning, and you go. So they'd be going around 2 or 3 times, getting mad about it because they just need to take a breath, go press.
Well, what I've encountered in that regard is that you are in the pit and you've pressed refuel and you've started refueling, but after the track call, it won't continue refueling.
Oh, is it possible?
Of its own volition.
Yeah. It doesn't continue fueling after the track call is over.
Right.
It's like done. Then the first thing you want to do is spend some time making sure all the controllers are nice and clean, that all their sliding wipers are clean, and that their button, and use the calibration feature in RCS 64 to calibrate with the button to make
sure. I've done that, yeah.
Because sometimes it's pressing a button will look like throttle.
Mm-hmm.
And so it reads throttle and says, oh, he's trying to leave the pits, and so it exits basically from whatever you're doing. That kind of stuff happens too. I mentioned annoyances with digital. that's a great example of it. But if your stuff is working and your controllers are clean and everybody's knows how it works and is doing the right thing, then it usually works pretty good.
But I agree, it's probably impatience on the part. One of the two of the guys is a little bit more impatient than the other one in that, and he's the one who experiences. But I experienced it Monday, so and it cost me 4 laps. So.
Well, I'll tell you what. One of my favorite bugs, and I still don't remember exactly what sequence of events causes it to happen, but it's definitely a refueling or new tires kind of situation combined with track call of some kind, that like I'll pull into the pits and I'm empty. I need to do a full tank because race is nowhere near over, or I need new tires, and I'll start that process, and then somebody track calls, and then all of those functions technically are supposed to stop during the track call until we get back to racing. But then once the track call is over, my tank is full or my tires are fresh, and I'm like, okay, I can leave now. That's happened
Sounds
like
like an exploitable bug.
That's if I knew how to make it happen, I would tell the guys so that they can fix that bug. But I love it when
to make it happen. You would knock somebody off while you're in the pits.
A cheater would, but that's not me. I would tell the guys how to repeat the bug, because as soon as you can repeat a bug, you can fix the bug. But I've never been able to nail down how to repeat that bug.
Sequence is.
Yeah. What you got there, Frank?
Mute. Hello there. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Frank.
Oh, thanks, Dennis.
You're welcome, buddy.
40 is just, we were all there.
It's a great time. I don't understand if I have a 42-year-old daughter, though.
You started early.
Very early. Last week, a gentleman brought up the fact that he raced Pioneer Legends, and I asked him what they do regarding the guides on the Pioneer Legends, and he mentioned having plus 1001 guides. Well, I ordered some from Electric Dreams, got them this morning, and what's the best way to do this? There it is. Oh, it is so nice now. I haven't tried it on the track yet, but very little. Actually, that's not tight enough.
I was gonna say, it looks like you screw that in a little more. Did you have to use any shims of any kind anywhere?
I did, because I haven't trued the tires to lower them yet. So I wanted to get the guide a little closer to the track, and I'll test that out. I may have to take the shims out once I put them on the track, but I wanted to thank him.
Which guide was that, you said?
Pardon?
What guide was that?
Slotting plus 1001.
Oh, yeah, okay.
1001?
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, I thought there was only one guide per package, so I ordered 5 of them, so I'd have enough for me and a friend, but now I've got 10 of them, so.
I'll take them.
Good to know.
But yeah, it like I said, right now it's still, I haven't messed with it enough to get it tuned in so it doesn't wiggle too much, but it'll be better, a lot better than the other end. And where am I? Yeah. So they work nice. I was doing.
So Frank, is that the Typhoon motor in there, Frank?
Yes.
Okay.
That is a Typhoon motor. That's what they come with.
All right, I'm gonna have to get me some slotting plus 1001s probably.
Yeah.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Yes, I did. I'm sure there are other guys maybe out there, but why mess around with anything else?
Yeah, I mean, if there's something that somebody knows works, I'm happy to just buy that rather than experimenting. Exactly. Somebody else can do the experimenting. All right, thanks for sharing that, Frank. I was showing off my Pioneer Legends Sunoco cars earlier during the chat, so that's probably something I'll be doing soon, is getting some of those guys. Awesome. So got about half an hour left. Anybody else got anything they want to share, show, ask, or tell? I already did my long spiel to waste a whole lot of time. I guess not. Maybe we'll end this in the chat early. You got something, Dennis?
Have we not got into the club and the racing piece
yeah,
like we did last time?
Yeah, let's do Club Corner. So nothing special happening. Still Monday night racing with the analog guys for me in the Tacoma area, EMSA Racing. What about you, John? Still just racing on your own and
Yeah, pretty much on my own, just working on the track and having fun and casting like mad, which is I'm not going to complain.
Actually, that reminded me. So this is not a club thing, but I got a message from a guy who was promoting the Cleveland Slot Car Show, which is on October 31st at the Quality Inn on Brecksville Road in Richland, Ohio. So it is a long, very long running slot car swap meet show, trade, buy, sell, slot car thing. So if you're in the Cleveland/Richland, Ohio area and want to get some great deals on slot cars.
When is it? When is it, Greg?
October 31st.
Oh,
Isn't it HO scale?
The flyer that he showed me was quite a bit of HO stuff, but they do say all scales, 1/32 and everything. I'm sure it's going to be primarily HO, as a lot of those shows tend to be. Usually have a, where all the guys from one scale kind of know it as that show, but then other guys come, so I'm sure there will be a small selection of other scales, but yeah, I'm sure it's primarily HO. But hey, slot car swap meet, it's a good thing. Hopefully more of those happen in the near future. So back on the club thing, anybody else want to share what their club is up to or will be doing? Dennis, I assume you had something you wanted to talk about or share?
Yeah, we did, because last Wednesday morning when we were on the call, I mentioned that we were going to be running here at my track in the afternoon. So, and you said, well, you better take some pictures and tell us about it. So if you could allow me to share my screen.
Sure thing. Go ahead.
Let me just check that I'm ready for it. Yeah, I think so. All right. So there were 6 of us, right? Frank here in the middle, who you know. The other guys are local racers, and it was just the 6 of us, and it actually turned out really well because, being a 3-lane track, three drivers and 3 turn marshals all the time, it worked out really well. And so we other way, sorry. We could talk about that picture later. There's a bunch of different things, but this is a little video.
Ooh.
It'll zoom out in a moment.
Yeah.
There we go.
Nice. Those slotted?
Yeah, slotted Alfa Romeos. We ran 2 IROC races at the beginning of the day. The first one was with a set of Alfa Romeo, fly racing Alfa Romeos, which I didn't take any pictures of. There's just 1 or 2 other pictures. Another one. This is practice beforehand, taken from the other end of the track.
Dennis, that previous video, you should set to music because somebody's really grooving out on his laps there.
Yeah, it's Gary. Gary and I are the ones who really move around. Anyway, so
come on, admit it. It's from your boy band days, right? Is that what it's from?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's for those who haven't seen the track, that's the track, and that's a little bit of the racing. So what we did was we ran 2 races early on. One with the fly racing Alfa 156 touring cars, which was fun because they're very closely matched. And then we ran a second race with those 3 Alfa T33s. One of which, for some reason, was a lot quicker and incidentally a lot noisier than the others. And I still haven't quite found out why. It was horribly noisy. I thought actually it had cracked a gear, but when I looked at it later, there's nothing wrong with it, but it was maybe a later version, and the motor is just a whole lot better. But everybody has to run every car. And then we ran 2 other short races for guys to use their own cars, and we just split them up by we ran 1 race for inline cars. You could run anything you wanted. Most guys ran slotted Group C's of some sort, and then we ran another one for angle winders, and that was angle winders and sidewinders. And there was a quite a selection. Some Thunder slots, some slotted Can-Am cars, a couple of slotted, other slotted classics like Mattress and things like that, a couple of the slotted LMPs with the flat sixes. And I ran that Toyota, that SRC Toyota that I showed you, I think last week or the week before, the new Toyota LMP. And that is a good car. As it turned out, I ran 2 laps more than everybody else with that car. But
although with the results you showed, you're a very gracious host. I don't think you were in first place.
I was. I only won the angle winder race. The rest of them, I strategically chose the wrong car or drove like a,
Frank, did you want to add to that club review of the previous race?
Yeah, it was a great day. Thank you, Dennis. That was the first time I had raced other fellows since January of last year. So it was great to go racing. I was going to I'm going to actually go to a far out race, which is our non-mag club with Stephen Farr Jones this Saturday at Eddie Shore's track. He calls it a mini Bula track. We're racing NSR F1s and slotted DTMs.
Nice. I still haven't gotten an NSR F1 or the Polo Car F1 or the Scale Auto. You get one of those.
The Scale Auto one isn't out yet, is it?
No, they're not out yet.
Isn't it? Oh, okay. What do you got, Jeremy? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Frank.
I was just going to say that the reason I haven't raced anywhere else is because of this stupid Delta variant that's going on in LA. And that's where most of the tracks we race with. So this will be my first race with the Far Out Club. This is the 4th one they've had.
Yeah.
And I've missed the other 3. So it's going to, I'm looking forward to Saturday.
Awesome. Well, definitely tell us about it next Wednesday. And Jeremy, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, just for club racers, I'm kind of curious, what's been your most popular class of racing, like the class that's had the most longevity? Or what's a class that you've tried for a season and said, we're never going back to that? For us, it was the one we got rid of was the Scale Electric F1 races, because parts just fly off. You break a wing, you're breaking a tire, and it's just like, I'm done. We did that 1 year, and that was it.
Yeah, for my clubs, the analog club, the one that is a perennial favorite that we're racing again is the NSR Classics. So your Ford GT40s and Mark 3s and 4s and P68s and Porsches and all that kind of stuff. If NSR makes it and it's Classic Le Mans, they're all over it. Usually, because of the way that EMSA does series, we basically we'll try something new every so often. But unless it's well received, we generally don't do it again. So we tend to come back to NSR Classics, slotted Group C, maybe Scale Electric Pioneer Trans Ams, just because they love the cars so much, not because they run superbly or anything. But those are easily the most popular ones. If somebody says, hey, let's run those again, pretty much everybody's going to say, yeah, okay. What about you, Frank?
At Far Out, I think I've only been there 3 or 4 years, but it's been going on for 15 to 20 years. The most long-lasting, I think, are the Ninco Le Mans classes, the Austin Healey, Porsche, the Cobras, XK 120s. I think those are one of the long.
Like all the Ninco classics, then.
Yes, basically.
Okay, yeah, those are nice cars.
Classics. One thing I've done, and I'm looking forward to racing there, is I've made what's called hybrids or Franken slots, whatever you want to call it. Oh, not the company. What I've done is taken a few of the old resins and put them onto the Ninco chassis, and I have to get an okay from Steven to run them.
I did that years back too.
Yeah,
putting resin bodies on the Ninco chassis.
Yeah,
just to have something that looked a little different.
The class we just got rid of supposed to start this year is we were running the SCX F1s, but they were getting so few and far between that we decided to go with the NSR F1s because they're available now. And so we don't race the SCX F1s any longer.
Yeah, open wheel cars of any kind are a hard sell for at least my clubs, just because there's such a challenge. You know, whether it's a classic or a modern open wheeler, you know, the tires touch and one of you's done for. You know, and it's hard to get some of these guys to drive through a turn clean, you know, on the inside of somebody else or even on the outside of somebody else. You go ahead and pass them on the outside all you want. If they lean out a little bit and your front hits them, you're gone. So yeah, the Ninco F1s are pretty cool too. With the steering and everything. I think SCX, did the SCX have steering? I don't remember. I know the Ninco ones did.
One or two of them did, like the Jordan and one or two others.
Yeah,
most of them didn't.
I always thought that was cool, just unnecessary.
Yeah, and it didn't work. Nobody ever used those cars.
Right, and the fly F1s have it as well, right? The Marches and
the Flies and the SRCs.
Right.
Oh yeah, yep.
It looks cool. It looks great.
For sure, especially in static photographs.
It doesn't work with the damn.
Anybody else got any input for Jeremy on their most popular? Go ahead, Mike. You're muted. You are muted. We can't hear you.
You're muted, Mike.
Go.
Got it.
Try again.
Okay. I tried your King of the Hill thing with non-magnet Polycar F1. And I put the Scale Auto tires on it.
Couldn't get them to
it's
hook
still
up.
hard. I reduced the voltage to 11.5. And then I started playing with RCS 64's magless throttle positions. That made a big difference. Still haven't got it dialed in, but neither one of the guys were really thrilled with it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try some Thunder Slots because Thunder Slots are useless as magnet cars. I mean, they're just terrible. So I'm going to try and do a non-magnet version with those and see if we can do King of the Hill and see how they like it and go from there.
And the tires on Thunder Slots are just like NSR. They respond real well to that cleaner as well. So even if you can't get those foamies to hook up, the NSR tires should hook up real nice.
Yeah, I've tried NSR Ultra Grips before, but I tried the new ones, and I guess the new ones are not as good as the old ones in that regard, apparently, according to the forum information. So according to my information, they don't work worth a darn. But
I mean, compared to anything with a magnet, it's never going to have as much traction as the same car with a magnet.
I got that, but it's still it's worse than the urethanes. And
that's not right.
It does, but
should be hooked up well better than the urethanes for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what NSR did with those Evo tires, but they don't work.
Yeah.
So what's coming? What are their cars coming with the Evo? Just the F1s or?
No, they. I'm not sure what they're putting on the cars themselves. This is all of their aftermarket stuff. There, Super Group Evos and Ultra Group Evos, and they're just not very good. I don't know what they've done and why.
I'll have to ask some of the guys because some of the guys got new cars for this series that have the new motors. And I assume that those same cars with the new motors would have the new tires on them, but maybe they're still including classic Super Grips on the cars, and Evo is an upgrade.
Yeah, I've got a couple of cars, a couple of NSRs with the new motors, and their tires were fine.
Oh, okay. So whatever the Evos are, they're not putting them on the cars, I guess.
Or not yet.
Or not yet. Okay, yeah. They're testing the market.
Didn't NSR have a red-colored tire?
Yeah.
Silicone or something?
Yeah, they have a red one and they have a gray one.
I haven't seen the gray one.
Isn't the Evo the same? Isn't the Evo the same rubber as the red? I thought I read that on a forum.
Might be.
Well, Alan said he uses the red.
What I read is that the Evo tire was good.
Talking about Alan, who comes on our chat?
Right, Alan Wickerson.
I guess, I mean, he's not going to use some bar tire, that's for sure. But it depends on what track you're using them on.
That's true.
He's not running them on sport, that's for sure. But Wayne, you have sport track. Have you ever used the red tires on it?
I haven't. I haven't had a set of NSR tires on any of my cars on that track. I intend to put some money down and get an NSR Classic at some time. And I had been looking around the web for tire suggestions or anything like that. And I stumbled across the fact that there was a red colored tire, and it was favorable reports that I was reading, and that the Evo was likely to be the red colored compound, but not red, just black. And I presumed, and I think I also read, that the Evo tire was working well for some people. But if Dennis is going to tell me they're not working for him, well,
they're not working for me because they don't work on my track. That doesn't mean that if you're running on polycar track, or if you're running on Ninco track, or you're running on maybe even Scalextric track, that they don't work there. Every surface is different, and every surface, the tires respond differently to the surfaces. And even on wood, the different tires respond differently to different paint. So, it's very difficult to tell.
Wayne, do you have any other cars with NSR tires or NSR cars?
No, none of them.
Okay, well, it'll be a new experience for you then. In my experience, NSR, the stock tires, whatever comes on the car, whether they're super or ultra grips, hook up really nicely on Scalextric Sport track, especially if you do the lighter fluid or the Scale Auto tire.
Well, the one experience I did have was the very first time I came across a pair of ultra grips on a car. I'd been loaned the car. It was a club car, and I took it home and I tried to true its tires, and I experienced that horrible balling up of the rubber that occurs with an NSR tire that I had never managed to do to anything else. But I could get around that by just going finer with the grit and gentler and slower. And I got the tires into good shape, and I took the car back to the club and used it at an event and did well with it. So I enjoyed running, and that was on Scalextric Sport. I enjoyed running NSR Ultra Grip compared to slotted N22. They were at least comparable, probably slightly better.
Yeah, I would definitely put them in the same class as far as hookup on Scalextric Sport, the slotted ends and the NSRs. I would imagine that Slotted produced the N18 and N22 as competition for NSR super grips and ultra grips, because the formulation is
such a shame that they're now in short supply.
I mean, such is the case for all kinds of things. We were talking about digital for so long. All kinds of digital things are in short supply because of the.
Slotted have brought out or are bringing out another compound, what they call a G25.
That's correct. I have had a set of those in my hands. I haven't run them, but I handed them off to someone else that did.
What have you heard about them?
So when they ran on Ninco track, and they looked very good.
Because I've run some here on some slotted angle winders, and they seem to run really well, and they true very easily. So I was quite impressed. That if you're looking for 22 short stuff, then remember that Sideways have some tires as well that are 22 short. And they work pretty well also.
And are they branded as Sideways and marked?
They're branded as Racer Sideways, yeah. They're not slotted tires. They're branded as Racer Sideways.
I see.
I see. Are they just Racer Sideways 22 shore tires, or are they like?
There's a couple of different names, as I recall. They have funny names to them that they're like Prime Growth. I'll have to go look for them. I don't remember offhand.
Do they come on any of their cars, or is that an aftermarket?
No, the stuff that comes on their car is closer to what I would think would be equivalent to an NSR Super Grip. They actually work pretty well on wood, but the 22 Shore stuff is just an aftermarket tire. I'll have a look for them and I'll tell you what they are.
I was going to say, see, at the moment, my rule set states that you use the tire that's supplied with the car, which can give different tires for different classes, or slotted N22. And at the moment, the club faces the dilemma that the slotted N22 is disappearing. Some of us still have stock, but the question has not yet been dealt with as to what's going to be the next alternative control tire, because it needs to be at least as good as the N22. Otherwise, it'll only be the people with the old stock that will continue to be quick.
Yeah, we seem to have managed to get at Electric Dreams. We seem to manage to get a whole bunch of 1171 N22s anyway. Lately, the 1172, the wider one, is not that easy to get at the moment.
The tires you're saying that Sideways is including that is similar in quality, is that only on GT cars? Because I haven't, the Group 5 cars I have, I was not impressed by the tires.
No, it's only on the GT3 cars.
Okay, that makes
the ones that come on the GT3 cars are really good.
What were you going to say, Frank?
I was going to echo what Dennis was just saying. Electric Dreams has the N22s slotted because I just got 3 packs today.
Yeah,
yeah, but it's only the 1171, which is the narrow one.
The narrow ones, yeah.
Right.
I mean, on the bright side, there's still, the companies are still alive and still producing things and trying new things and hopefully not abandoning perfectly good things.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll have to get. I don't have a Sideways GT3 car. Obviously, I'm gonna have to get one because they have completely different motors that I'm used to and different tires and everything. That might be an upcoming IMSA series. Sideways GT3. We've done the Sideways Group 5 a couple of times now, but we haven't done a GT3. They've got several GT3 models now, don't they?
Yeah, they have. They have the BMW M6. They have the Lamborghini Huracan. They have the Ford GTE. What else?
And multiple liveries of each of those.
And multiple liveries of each, yes.
Yeah.
And so far,
only one
I think
Ford GT so far.
The Ford GTE, the Ford GTE and the Huracan are probably the better choice at the moment.
Just because they're better racers.
The M6 is a long car, and it's big and long, and it feels a bit like a bus compared to the other two.
Like maybe the slotted Maserati in Maurizio's video, he's pointing out how it barely fits in the case.
Yeah. Here's the Sideways tire. So they call it a Pro Speed, but it's 22 Shore.
Okay. Interesting. Because I remember.
Sorry, Dennis, they're urethane then, are they?
No, they're rubber.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Because I mean, Slotted had the F22s, which I liked, but the N22s are completely different. So it's not just a Shore, it's not just a.
No, it's not. There's something else involved in it as well. But the from the F22 to the N22, what I found anyway was that you gained a lot of convenience in terms of the fact that they were much easier to true and to grind, but you didn't really lose any traction. So, because the F22s and the N22s perform about the same, but it's just a lot easier with an N22 to get them to perform that way.
For sport track racers, the N22s hook up much better because you can do the treatments to it the F-22s just turn to goo if you do the treatments too much to it. I wouldn't be surprised if they hook up more or less the same on painted wood track, but on a sport track, it's completely different.
Mm-hmm. And I do very little post-treatment. When I'm grinding and I'm done, that's it. I don't oil them and do all kinds of weird things like that to the stuff. I just leave them. Yeah,
and that's one of the advantages to a nice routed painted track, because you don't need to do quite as much. For sport track, some things just don't want to hook up until something's been done to them. Like Mike's been trying out the Scale Auto foamies on my recommendation and others and stuff, and he just can't get them to hook up. And it's it's like, well, how much treatment do you need to put on the stupid things before they start to hook up? So I've been telling him, don't douse the tires with the cleaner stuff, because then they'll come off, right? But you got to put it in there enough to soften it so that it hooks up. Where is the happy medium? So it's like little by little, and sooner or later it'll hook up. Hopefully you find that sweet spot soon, Mike, because I hate suggesting anything that people waste their money on as a result. But
if you're worried about them coming off the rim, then instead of using that Scale Auto cleaner, rub some high SPF suntan lotion into the tires and then wipe it off.
Oh yeah, because that won't just soak right through. It'll just
that'll give you the traction, but it doesn't detect the glue.
That might be worth a try, Mike.
I might try that. Although I will say I have not experienced having the tires get loose on the rim yet, even dousing them the way you said not to.
you went that far?
I'm going to go with the more is better thing, but it still hasn't worked. I don't know.
Michael, I think Dennis's suggestion is the Californian approach, right?
Here you go.
Suntan oil.
I mean, it's worth a try.
There's sun over here that it's probably works.
That's where it started. It started in radio control cars out here.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got plenty of sun out there in Wenatchee, Mike. I'm sure there's some high SPF stuff in your house somewhere to try.
Yeah.
Okay. There is definitely something strange about Mike's experience with Scalextric Sport, because it doesn't match mine, and I don't think it matches yours either, does it, Greg?
No.
Mine doesn't sound as bad as what I don't have the dilemmas Mike continually seems to have.
And at this point, I don't think it's the magnet versus non-magnet thing. I mean, that's he understands that the magnets will obviously make any tire hook up, and to a certain extent. So he's not looking for that, and for whatever reason, it's like one of these days I just got to come over and drive my cars on your track and say, you know what, you're right, my cars aren't hooking up on your track either. And on that bombshell, we're going to stop the recording for now. You're pointing. I don't know who you're pointing at, John. Go ahead and unmute yourself. And
sorry, Frank put his hand up just to comment, I think, on what we're talking about.
Okay, go ahead, Frank.
I'm just going to say, gentlemen, I got to go to my birthday dinner, y'all.
Well, happy birthday again, Frank. And I'm going to stop the recording. I'm actually going to stop the recording now. Everybody wave bye. Bye.
Bye.
My ice cream.